I was looking at it thinking like I read the book, finished the book maybe a day before I went to see it in the theaters. And I read a bunch of reviews from people who'd already seen it like the opening night. And somehow I feel like those things like maybe all bled into my disenjoyment of the movie. Not disenjoyment.
You're getting Dune from all sides. But I guess that just means that you can like pick the facet of it that you want to engage with. But you know what? That's like the beauty of these kind of adaptation things. No one thing is the definitive version. You can pick the things that you like and discard the things that you don't.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I didn't like my experience. It was a packed IMAX theater. Like, it's kind of hard to beat those kind of experiences now anyway.
Yeah.
But
I would love to hear just everybody's like on the table thing, because like, baseline, it's hard to say that this movie isn't like awesome in a general sense. And that like, even if I say things that I don't like about it, it's like, I mean, they did a great job. It's cool. It's good. There's a lot of stuff to love. I maybe have like some quibbles with some structure and maybe like design element and choices, but it's like for a Dune adaptation between these two movies, I mean, he killed it. It's hard to imagine somebody doing it more competently,
No, I agree with that, and yeah, I think the beginning. Well, I'll introduce you, and then I think maybe we'll start out with just like what everyone thought of the movie, and I think being that this is something that's like still in the theater, it's maybe goes a little different than something like when we talked about a movie from the '80s, and it's marinating on everyone's minds forever.
Sit back in your seats, get something to eat, and watch this movie. Don't let the kiddies see it, because, well, we'll let you hear the beginning version. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Left of the Projector. I am your host, Evan, back again with another film discussion from the left. You can follow the show at leftoftheprojector.com and all the other online social media places. This week on the show, we are going to be discussing the widely, though we're about to see how widely, loved film Dune Part 2. Directed by Dennis Villanueva, this film has already raked in tons of money, $650 million in the box office. It's still in the theater. It boasts a whopping 4.5 rating on Letterboxd, and I've seen it hailed as the greatest sci-fi film of the 21st century. Literally, someone told me that. And with me to discuss, to see if any of those things are true, I have returning guests from an episode on Brazil. I have Commie Trucker, and I have the Chapo Trap host and introducing producer and host Chris Wade. Thank you both for being here today.
Hey. Glad to be back.
So we're just gonna go right into this movie. Everyone probably has seen it, who's listening to this, I presume, or read it, or at least saw part one. We're just gonna see what everyone thinks, because like I said, it's getting incredible reviews. Everyone loves this movie, and I'll save mine for last. So whoever wants to maybe want to kick it off, like obviously you both saw it in the theater because it's still in the theater, so that plays into the experience too, I think.
I think it's a really great sci-fi flick. I thought they both were. It has its problems. I don't like the way it portrays some of the Fremen and the Bene Gesserit in it. I think it was a blast to see in theater. It's visually beautiful. I like Dennis Villanueva. He's a pretty consistent director and producer, but as far as an introduction to the Dune series, I think it was fine.
I think it sounds like we feel pretty similarly about it, in that, I think we're both like impressed with how well it did for a Dune adaptation. Something that, it's hesitate to say anything is unadaptable, but it presents a lot of challenges. It's hard for me to imagine somebody doing something, I keep coming to this word, like more competent, that delivers the highs, as well, and just gives you an entertaining feature. Yeah. Obviously, you can make different versions of this, and I think that's like, it's around the margins that people have disagreements, but I don't think anybody would say that it's like it's bad. Greatest sci-fi film of the 21st century is interesting because I don't know what else you would put up there, just because it's such like a large scale accomplishment, of which there have been few things like that, other than, I don't know, the Star Wars.
I never watched Everything Everywhere All at Once. Is that sci-fi?
Kind of.
Yeah, loosely.
Genre bending, maybe.
It's more of like a I would kind of call that a fairy tale, if that makes sense. Yeah. I think that there's like it's talking about like multiverse stuff, but it really is it's more just like and I don't mean that to diminish that at all, even though I think that movie is fine, not great. But you know, I think it's more exists in the realm of like magical realism than like you know, these are space computers doing things.
I like space computers.
I would. Yeah.
We love space computers.
I mean, I would say if you want to talk about the most impressive sci-fi movie of the 21st century, I think you could probably make the case that it's spectacle wise, especially you combine it with the first part. I think it's hard to argue that those things. For me, the movie was very entertaining. I didn't walk out being like, that stunk, but I think I was just saying before we started recording is I had just read the first novel right before, like the day before I had gone in to see it. And so I had all these plot points from the book in my head. I'm like checking them off in my head. Like, did they get that part? Did they get part, which is my own fault in part. So I still enjoyed it, but I do all have a lot of like minor quibbles with some of the plot development and some of the characters, like you said, Andre. And other than that, I mean, the only other movies I can think of in the last 20 years of this caliber, I could think of, God, you know, Avatar. I mean, that's a sci-fi movie. I don't know if I necessarily think it's better. Like that's, you know.
I never watched it.
I don't know if I like that more.
Can we stop making movies that are more than 2 hours long? Can we just keep them to a crisp 90 minutes?
I mean, I guess I feel like my kind of thought about both, because so here's the thing is that like my experience with Dune was like I watched Lynch Dune in college and I'm like, this is a wacky bizarre experience that is not good but is like a lot of fun. Yeah. And then like didn't really think about it, and then Dune the book was a pandemic read for me, and obviously all the Chapo guys are big Dune heads, and we've done like a full episode like kind of you know interrogating Dune and its legacy. So they got me on it, and then like Dune was a pandemic read, and then like a year after I read it, the first one came out. I was kind of cool on it when it came out, but then it like really grew on me. It became like a go-to just like vibes watch for my wife and I, you know, like you know, just coming home, it's like 10 p.m. It's on a Friday night, like let's just throw on something. Why not Dune? And so that one really grew on me, and probably grew from like an original, like on first watch, like 3.5 stars to like 5 stars now. I really like the first one.
I actually like it more.
Yeah. And then I saw the second one. It left me a little underwhelmed at first. Still very good, but so that's like kind of my Dune experience arc.
Yeah. I mean, the only... Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I grew up reading all the Dune books, and that's, in my youth, that's how I got into reading a large part. That's what drew me in. And so it had like a special significance to me growing up. But then I think a lot of the way we look at these two Dune movies is the future Dune movies. If Villeneuve fully embraces Paul as an antagonist, as the bad guy, as the villain, then it'll definitely grow on
Spoilers.
me more. Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I totally. I was thinking about that when you brought up Avatar as like another what is the great 21st century sci-fi thing, because it's I mean in this franchise era, it's like it's one thing to compare Avatar 1 versus Dune Part 1 as like two movies, but now we are looking at Avatar as a whole franchise and a whole story it's telling versus Dune as a whole franchise and a whole story it's telling. And I would say that like I would probably think either individual Avatar movie is better than the Dune movies, but then also if you're thinking Dune Part 1 and Part 2 as two parts of the same movie, maybe that's more impressive than Avatar, the original, and then 12 years later a sequel. I don't know. It's hard to compare these things at this point because you're not just talking about a single thing.
Yeah, I think the Dune story, like just the source material is probably more compelling than Avatar. I guess, you know, it's one of those things where it's one is James Cameron sort of like, you know, child. I mean, this is all he's doing for the rest of his life. It's just, he's just going to make Avatar movies. And, you know, I guess maybe Villeneuve is going to be making, you know, at some point, I suspect he'll pass it off to someone else to make, because they're making a series. I guess they're going to make more movies. I mean, we don't have to dwell on that. I mean, when I think about standalone sci-fi movies that I might like more than this, again, it's maybe I'm being stupid just to kind of comparing it, but like other movies that I really liked as their own movies, like I think of Children of Men is like one of my favorite sci-fi movies.
Geez,
Yeah.
And I would say that I would like that movie better than this, but it's not the same scope. It's not the same kind of experience.
Yeah, I mean, this is aiming for something so
it's
epic.
a grand scale.
Mm-hmm.
And like, and I do think one of the things I like about it that I know bounces off a lot of other people is I do just like the kind of austerity and grandeur that it has become kind of like the signature style of Villeneuve's like sci-fi stuff. I'm even thinking about like, the epic, ominous, perfectly smooth egg spaceships of Arrival, like that was a good like trial run for his design of this. And there's just like so much stuff where it's like a giant thing moving slowly on a giant screen where you're kind of sitting there and being like, what more could I possibly want? This is what movies are for, to make something huge, to see something huge on a huge screen and go, holy shit, look at the size of that
see the
thing.
contradictions of scale.
He hits that out of the park. You can't, there's no one, I don't think you could deny that his like vision for something that's just incredibly grand is in looking at Dune and Dune Part 2. It's like he nailed it. Like, I think that's
a master of scale.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think it's when you get into like some of the plot. I mean, we don't have to go through, piece by piece of the entire movie as it goes through. It's also very long. I think we could maybe touch on some of the like key moments, but for anyone who's seen the first one and maybe hasn't seen the second one, it really just continues at the exact same moment that the previous one ends. Is you already have, you have Paul and Jessica, in the desert with the Fremen trying to get to safety, and they're being, potentially attacked by the Harkonnens who still believe they might still be alive. And it's like you said, the scale of just seeing them in the desert and trying to survive. I mean, it's hard to beat that. I think the beginning of this movie I thought was pretty compelling. I think later parts, I think it kind of
petered off.
There's some.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad that all of us have read the book, because I think one of the main things that I was looking forward to talking about with you guys is one of the main things that this movie left me feeling was like the challenges of adaptation, and I think that, with the first Dune movie, you can rely so much more on plot and it's a lot of setup. And then this movie, I think it really runs into the wall of like how Dune and Herbert writes, which is a lot of, and especially as he's set up everything and can get into pure like kind of examination, is just like a lot of interior monologues, a lot of writing the thoughts of each individual character in all parts of a scene at the same time.
His writing and like a series of essays, on people's behavior.
It's like
structures.
Paul thought, and then like Paul thought, and then like 3 paragraphs, and then and then Paul says one word, and then Jessica replied blank, and then Jessica thought 3 paragraphs of thoughts. It's like, which is both the fun and tedious part of Dune, is that it's like so much interiority, and like sometimes it's a little clunky, but at least you get a full picture of everything. And then I just feel like as we get into like the second and third parts of Dune Part 2, the second and third acts, it's just like
all that's
so
lost.
much of it's lost, and then also when it's tried to convey it, it's a little tedious and stuff.
Well,
that's kind of like my overall take on it.
I understand the difficulty of trying to convey inner monologues and the intricacies with which Herbert writes, like ecological systems and everything. But a lot of what's lost is like the monolith of the Fremen people and the generations of struggle and despair that formed these complete units of fighting forces. And then the way that not only Paul adopts and changes, but the way it changes him. And a lot of that's lost in the film, because years go by in between books 1 and 2 in the book and the actual book. And just like a lot of the intricacies is lost, and I understand why, but it's still frustrating.
That's what makes it so hard to make these movies, right? Like that's the challenge that you're facing.
That's a great observation, Andre, because like this is something my wife actually pointed out about it, who again really liked the first one. It only grew on her as well over time. As we were walking out, it's like, okay, I feel like the first movie there was a lot of the joy and excitement of discovery. Like, it's showing you new things. It's showing you how it's showing you Atreides and how Atreides works and what their traditions are and like how that interlocks with the Harkonnens and what their vibe is. And then they get to Dune and you learn all the rules of like Dune ecology, and everything you see is new. And then, the Fremen were introduced in the first movie, but I feel like they kind of, as you were just saying, Andre, kind of, I mean, we both saw a lot of it, but also didn't get like the weight and the joy of introduction of a lot of these things. Like, you see that giant pool of water that is like every Fremen's water forever, but there's something lost in like the kind of
the desperation.
It feels more like there's no, and it also just feels like a little clunkier in this movie than the kind of joy of discovery in the new one. You're like, well, you need to know about this because we're going to blow it up later, and then Paul's going to have some weird visions and stuff.
But it's also like what's also lost is like the small joys that these communities have. You know, it's not just, it's the small joys that come from a life of struggle, that anybody can recognize.
I think I think one of the things, I mean, this is also one of those things because I had just read it and I felt like, it would have been cool to see it. I think what you're saying, Andre, is like getting more you don't get much insight into the Fremen's sort of society other than like when they're eating meals, when Paul's kind of getting looks when he, first gets to the city, and, when they're traveling around and they're attacking the various Harkonnen, spice mining. But one thing that I wished was in this, and I can understand why it would have been 4 hours long, if they had Hera, Jameis's like sort of wife by custom that he has. I felt like that would have added like this feeling of what the community within the Fremen had and like their culture. It would have connected, which was, I think, one of the things that was lost.
Yeah, it definitely would have connected Paul deeper into this Fremen culture.
And instead, you just see Jameis as a ghost, basically, or a vision, which is, I think, a totally like fine.
I thought that worked. Yeah, I thought that
like
worked.
Storytelling conceit, and so especially like when let in with that little tease of like beware of the jinns of the desert, because they will tell you things and stuff, and then he starts seeing this thing. Like, again, I think this goes back to the very beginning of being like totally great, often very clever adaptations, but it's just like you can think of different things, and I think like another part of that is that where it gets like tedious is when they keep. And this was one of my big problems with the essential narrative is like when they keep going into telling you a lot of being like, oh, the southern Fremen are the messianic ones and the northern Fremens are the skeptical ones, and you can't go south because then that'll be too dangerous, but you have to convince the north. And it's just like a lot of stuff going back and forth about this where I'm like, I stop just saying it, like just have some interactions and stuff. But this is my like. Yeah, this is my big narrative problem with it, is that I kind of realize it as I'm watching, is that I guess personally I just find premonition narratives kind of tedious, because it puts you in this narrative bind, especially like doomsday premonitions or when people have visions where you're spending the entire movie like Paul is having visions of the cool thing that happens at the end of the movie, and his character arc is being like, no, I can't let the cool conclusion of this movie happen. We have to prevent the big awesome battle at the end of the movie from happening. No, I can't give in to letting the big cool battle happen. And it's like we know where it's going, and at a certain point, I know that that's supposed to be the metaphysical thrust of the entire series, but that just feels more compelling to read somebody internally wrangle with it than like you're showing worms attacking the Imperial ziggurat, and I'm like, yes, I would like to see it. Please give in to the visions, Paul.
It's a mix, because I think maybe you wrote in your review, Chris, online, like the high points of the, riding the sandworm and some of these other like grand scenes are just super fucking cool. And like, that's what you wanted to see when you saw this movie. It's like the connecting pieces of it. I felt also that you just don't really, this thing, especially with the South aspect, I felt like they overplayed the idea that like, that they were like these blind fundamentalists, specifically, I can't think of his name at the moment. Stilgar, yeah. Stilgar. Like he felt very much like they made him or portrayed him as this like, I believe everything, I'm a blind follower. And I feel like there was this much slower process. And they also really play up the idea of like this decades and centuries of propaganda that they had sent through. And I just felt like it was more, how would I describe it? It just felt kind of making them seem like they're just blind followers of something, as opposed to
they turned
like we're learning to believe something.
Yeah, I think they kind of turned the Fremen into cartoon characters in a few scenes. Like the first time he said he's modest, he must be the Messiah. That's a funny bit, you know. And then the second time, that's funny bit too. But then it keeps going, and it's no longer a funny bit. And then these Fremen become this cartoon character without any inner monologue.
Yeah, and another thing where I totally like get why you would do that, and the idea is like, okay, Stilgar was basically convinced in the first movie, you know, so he enters this movie essentially a true believer, right? And so you have to have, and you know, again, like the narrative dynamic of being like almost like a 12 Angry Men thing, where you've got one guy who's going to like slowly convince everybody else of the thing that he believes through passion. And I will say that Javier Bardem does a really entertaining job of playing this.
He does.
The movie. Yeah. All the performances in this series are also awesome. Except I might have a controversial worse opinion, but maybe we can get to, or worse performance, but maybe we can get to that later. Okay. But yeah, I totally agree, is that by having him be so zealous right off the bat and looking for everything to confirm his zealotry, I mean, maybe that is the commentary, is that once you believe, every new piece of data is only going to be twisted to confirm your belief. But cartoonish. And people picked up on that. It is like, that's became the meme is that like you see like the tiniest sign,
and then you believe,
you know, and then you believe, oh, he had no problem twisting off the pickle jar cap. Lisan al-Gaib. You know,
he put the USB in on the first try.
Yeah, exactly. The people pick up that it is jokey in the movie. That
it is. I mean, you needed some kind of comedic aspect. Otherwise, like, there isn't that much funny in the book, I guess you could say.
So it's not a funny book.
You needed something, otherwise it's too dry. And so I get it. And I think, you know, it worked for me. Like, that's completely true.
Yeah.
And I think the other thing that they also, I mean, maybe we can talk about some of the other character. We talked about Stilgar a bit, but they also kind of changed. I mean, maybe one of the biggest changes from the book to this, and I completely understand why they had to do this, is Jessica's the daughter that she's, you know, pregnant with, that, you know, Paul is able to, you know, understand. And I think in the book, he knows she's pregnant. Does he just have that feeling in the movie, or does she tells him?
Yeah. He says there's a line in the first one where he realizes that he's baby. Yeah.
Or on the chopper,
that's when he starts to really use his mentat and prophesial forces to, you know, make prime computations, and that's how he discovers his mom's pregnant.
And I think that communication, like the visuals of, you know, her talking to the unborn child was cool looking. But I mean, of course, there are people thinking like, oh, you know, I wish they actually had her be born, and you have this adult child, which I don't think would have been probably the right way to go, and would have been very weird.
I mean, in one way, I think it's a cop out, because it is one of the more batshit ideas of the book, and you're like, you want to go with the craziest stuff, and like, hey, buddy, Lynch had the balls to put a weird adult baby on screen.
That's true.
But also, I do kind of appreciate the audacity of having several scenes that you could describe as starting with, like, you know, on the screenplay, you just imagine the direction interior womb, and it's like like an actual like character inside. I mean, it is kind of cool, but adult baby, I think, is weirder and more off-putting, and so you would hope. But to see it.
in the source material in Frank Herbert's Dune, I mean, Alia is known as an abomination. You know, she's called abomination by the Fremen. She's called abomination by the Bene Gesserit. And the whole point is that it's so off-putting seeing this toddler, you know, talk as a fully grown person. So I mean that, I think that might have been the better choice, but I don't know.
It would have been cool. I don't know how they would have done it, if they had to use like CGI for them, or just have.
And I wanted to see Alia,
just Anya Taylor-Joy's head on like a 5-year-old's body. We have the technology. We could do that better than they could in the 80s.
That'd be great. That'd be great.
Oh, for sure they could. I mean, so that would have been pretty ballsy, and I would appreciate. I would have honestly, if they had done that, I would have been like, I bow down to you for this film. But I mean, I think you do.
No, Andre,
Okay.
I do want to say, like, Andre, I think you're totally right that her being called an abomination, it fits into more what I think our general critique is that like all the Fremen accepting the myth and prophecy stuff just, I guess, feels so on rails that we're like, you know, there are a few scenes where it's like Shani and her buddies are like making fun of him from the outside, but it's like it feels very perfunctory, and you're missing even more of that. Like, no, these are outsiders who, despite eventually leading them to victory over their enemies, are like a parasite infecting this body that is the Fremen society, and like all the off-putting stuff
that comes along with accepting these outsiders.
It comes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it should add to it more. Yeah. And they indicate it, but it's you know, you see all the shots of them of like the population of Fremen like whispering and shooting nasty looks and stuff. Well, I guess it just never really again, perfunctory also, is the way that it felt like. Yeah.
The only inner I feel like the only personality traits that Jessica and Alia are given in the movie are cruel manipulation. You know, that they don't have any kindness or caring towards anyone, only the desire to gain power and to move people. I feel like that's unfair too.
And tell me, this is a little bit later in the movie, or this is later in the book, and it's something that they cut out of the movie, and I don't know, it just makes me think of this, and I think that Jessica's character felt a little bit, I mean, I think the performance was incredible. I thought that Rebecca Ferguson was amazing in the movie, but I think that the character was like a little bit like one note in that sense. Like it didn't feel like she gave her like much depth. And I think would have been really cool if they had kept in the fact that, you know, Gurney actually believed that Jessica was the traitor, and they have that scene like, you know, in the southern city where they're like, he's about to, you know, cut her throat, and kind of makes you have this sympathy for her, which you don't get in this. I feel like they made her unsympathetic.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. I and again, this is the stuff of we keep coming back to. I don't know. I feel like we're all sensing the desire to kind of grade on a curve here, because it's like hard to imagine a better version of this.
Absolutely
but yeah,
not.
it's like they're balancing so many different things going on in this that it's like you want more moments of softness from Jessica, and also more moments of peril to kind of like emphasize both what a bind she is in. I mean, I think you get that a little bit from like how Stilgar kind of giving her the lowdown, being like, yo, you have to become the mother of the siege now. Like there is no, like, either you're going to do this thing that is going to fuck up your entire Bene Gesserit plan, or that we're going to kill you. Sorry, figure it out by the end of the day, you know?
Yep.
You circle back by EOD to figure out if you're going to drink the water of life.
That's true. I feel like, you said, that I don't see anyone else being able to make a better Dune movie. I just don't.
Yeah. Which then gets into the question of like, is the description of unadaptable true? Which, you know, I don't obviously not, but it's just like, what choices do you make of what do you emphasize and what do you cut?
I think with 2 hours, what is it? 2 hours and 45 minutes. With the two movies over 5 hours or close to 5 hours. Yeah. I feel like a lot of time was wasted.
Well, maybe, I mean, but that's like the grandeur of it that you need, right?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, the question is like, is it wasting stuff on not doing plot, or is it doing the stuff that you actually want to see, which is watching cool shit happen?
I think
like the gladiator fight on Jetty Prime.
Yeah, I didn't.
Getty Prime.
I think you
Getty
lose
Lee Prime.
Getty Lee Prime. Yep.
You lose like some of the magnitude of the movie without those, like, you know, like you mentioned, Chris, like the Arrival type of shot with this grand beautifulness. I think the only way I can think of, and this is like, you know, maybe an unpopular opinion, is you could have made them 3 movies, or you could have made it a series.
Yeah.
But the series, you would have had a chance to tease out much more. 3 movies would have been kind of crazy.
The other thing that I would love to see is go the other direction. I would love to see, and I'm sure somebody will do this, like an enterprising fan cut that makes like one 4 hour 20-minute movie of all of them with like an intermission.
Okay.
And like and like edits it as like one thing, because I think that then you would. My imagination is that you would get like the propulsiveness of the first act the first part that like launches you into the second one. Cut out a lot of extraneous stuff of the second one. Lean into the fact that you kind of by the end of the first part, like he's going to accept his fate and visions. You don't have to like dwell on that as much. And kind of condense, streamline, go for the awe, grandeur, magnificence. That would be that's what I want to see. I want to see the.
Why don't you do it?
Let's call it.
You have the skill. You have the time.
Things on my plate. I'm putting it out into the world that somebody else should do it.
What's Peter Jackson up to? What's he been doing?
Yes, Peter Jackson. Topher Grace apparently has a recut of, I think, one of the Star Wars movies or Phantom Menace. I think that there's like legendarily in his, like, as a hobby, Topher Grace like recut some of the Star Wars prequels into something that made like more sense. And the rumor is like, if you're like friends, he'll screen it for you, and people are like, it's pretty good. So
it can't be worse.
Topher, if you're out there,
you're right.
It's
one 85-minute movie for the first 3.
Great.
That's perfect. That's really all you need to invest in that franchise.
Well, that's like the whole second movie was like kind of unnecessary. Like the Clone Wars, like you could have just not had that movie and been like, this is a 2-parter.
Yeah. So yes, I'm the 4:10. I think you can do them in. I think you can do it in 4:10. A really satisfying, like, make a full evening of it. Double Dune.
Dune 2 needs more kettlebell. More cowbell.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
If James Cameron wasn't like on his life mission to make 6 avatars, he has the technology and the skills, and you need someone with like a really grand vision. Because that's the thing about Villeneuve. Like he does have like the grand vision for these kinds of things. Even if I don't love all of his choices to the plot, to the narrative, he does like a masterful job of just building suspense and like all the planets, everything.
I'm sorry, did Villeneuve do Sicario? Is that one of his?
He did.
Okay.
Yes.
That was really
Sicario 1, not 2, Day of the Soldado. Yeah. No,
They're making a third one, I think.
Yeah, people. I think that people. There's a certain like genre film snob that don't like him for the austerity, the cleanness of his vision, and like kind of how neat everything is in his world. Which I understand. I mean, it's a very specific vibe that I think people who want something a little rougher in what they're doing, maybe with a little more heart,
the people that
a little more
the people that like bands,
go Andre.
People that like bands playing out of a garage instead of in a studio.
Yeah, and you can even do it like on a huge scale, but a little more. I think that the common thing I see is it's like too neat.
You want a Michael Mann version or something.
Yeah, exactly. But you would hope that you would be able to get both those types of vibes in the cinema, but it's such feast or famine with movies now that you kind of that if what you're getting in your monster sci-fi epics is not what you like, there's really not another another option. Yeah. I guess The Creator was the other thing from like recent times, but I heard that was very bad.
I like that. Really?
You like The Creator?
I thought it was okay.
I thought it was pretty good. Yeah, I enjoyed that too.
It had a lot of issues to it. Like politically, I think it was a good message. I think it kind of went maybe too big in a way. Like
but that's a little more of like, even though that is like epic in scale. I didn't see it, but it seemed like that's got a little more of the like junk future, a little more sentimentality to it, a little more like messiness to just even like the design aesthetic, even though it's operating. Look, I saw the trailer a billion times with that terrible Dream On interpolation. But I know that there's like a giant space station that's like beaming down shit on Earth that looked pretty like Villeneuve-esque in terms of its scale.
I'd say so.
Yeah, that movie was almost like a combination of like his style with I don't know, like the Children of Men kind of
Or
like
what's
grittiness.
one with Die Antwoord in it? The one sci-fi?
Chappie, of course.
Chappie, yeah.
Chappie,
Pointing to your girlfriend, that's
It
Chappie.
felt kind of like Chappie with a little more cleanness, like Villeneuve. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not as gritty and dark as Chappie, for sure.
Yeah. Or as like distant and cold.
Yeah.
Even though it's very hot on the planet Dune. You know, I would call like the Dune filmmaking like, you know, cold and distant. A beautiful painting that you're like gigantic,
sterile.
beautiful painting that you're like looking at from a distance.
But that's also another problem with I feel like in the film is that all the people are emotionally closed off. There's no emotive.
Yeah. And then
That's the
without
critique I
getting
heard.
the Frank Herbert like interior monologue, you're like missing out on everything other than like these moments of, you know, again, like showing Paul's vision over and over and then him waking up being like, oh no, my vision.
And one of the things we haven't really talked, we talked about most of the stuff a lot, you know, a lot of the things that are happening, you know, at the beginning of the movie on Arrakis. There's obviously those, you mentioned, Chris, briefly, like the gladiator fight later on and some of the other.
That's an A+ for me. That whole sequence rocks.
It is. And I think that a lot of the scenes off of Arrakis were really good, except for I felt like there was too much played it, like wasted time in the movie where they showed how cruel like Robin is and some of these like cruelness, which I understand. They're like, the Harkonnens are cruel people, but I feel like there's times where they could have just used that to some other means or something.
Raban or Fade.
Yeah. And the
Raban.
Yeah.
On Arrakis.
And I think
sorry, go ahead.
Like I just said the Getty Prime sequence, great, just because it looked cool, and I also love that it was like interiorly motivated. When they had that line that was like "our black sun," and it was like, so it's not just style; it's like this is how things actually work. That was all good, but another thing that I was missing in that like joy of just discovery and weirdness of the first one is seeing stuff like the Sardaukar planet with like the throat singing guy and stuff, and that one shot in the first one that I think is like my favorite thing in the whole movie of like the weird spider mutant.
That was cool.
Human spider mutant eating. Yeah. Where when you're seeing stuff, you're just getting glimpses of things that are truly weird that are not lingered on or explained. So like in the second one, that Getty Prime sequence looks awesome. Austin Butler doing a great job. Really wonderful performance. I'm all in the tank for Butler. You're watching Skarsgård float around. It's cool, but there's nothing like weird that makes you ask questions that aren't answered. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And I do think that that's like a lovely thing about great sci-fi. And one of the things that has generated so much Star Wars interest over so much time is that those first 3 Star Wars movies, not the prequels, the first 3 movies are full of like so many little images and design details and dim edges where you're like, well, hey, now what's going on here? Why is this robot being turned upside down and dunked in water while shit is being branded on its foot? Yeah. What is going on here? No further explanation. You have to wonder about that for years. Yeah,
it's creating a mythology. That's what's so fascinating. Yeah. That's how I like my sci-fi. I want all the questions and none of the answers.
Yeah, and I feel like the first movie is the first Dune Part 1 is like a lot of stuff where it's like, all right, we're going to tell you some stuff, we're going to show you some other, but it's going to be like, here's a question, here's an answer, here's a question. There is no answer to that one. Here's a question with an answer, here's a question, not getting an answer to that. And then the second one is just the feeling of like answer. I
gotta say, I am really stoked to get the third movie and finally get some. That's when all the crazier stuff happens with the face dancers and Leilaxu and all that crazy bioengineering. That's what I'm excited for.
I need to continue on and read the second book now.
It gets pretty nuts.
Well, yeah, I just finished the second one. I hadn't read the second one until literally after I saw the movie. I'm like, all right, what's going to happen? I just saw the movie. What's going on? But I think I completely agree about the comparison to Star Wars of just like, you go into like the little bar, you have all the things that are happening in there, the little characters that just don't mean anything. You're like, what is that guy? What are they arguing about? And we got that.
40 years of content out of Boba Fett having a really cool costume design that made everybody be like, I gotta know more about this guy.
He just
and
looked
at
so
almost
cool.
Every place where you get the Yeah, when you get the answer to what's going on with him, it's always disappointing because like sometimes just seeing a guy with a cool outfit who has like a flamethrower arm, that's kind of all you need. And the more you learn about him, the less like mysterious and interesting it gets. But that's like one of those things of being like, you show a piece of cool design. He gets 5 minutes of screen time, gets dispatched. Again, 40 years of people being like, what is up with that guy? Let's hear more about him.
Just a quick aside, nothing to do with Dune, but from the ages of like 2 to 6, every single picture of me, I was holding my little Boba Fett action figure. Just for
exactly.
Yep.
I think my vote for I was thinking about this when I was watching like the Boba Fett Star Wars TV show is like has to be in the canon top 5 like just film costume designs of all time, just in terms of how much juice they've gotten out of that one character for just having a sweet costume design.
It was just very appealing.
Yeah, like can't say anything about George Lucas's decisions in that first trilogy. I mean, maybe there's some of the redos, like the special effecty ones.
Lucas thrived on being restricted by what he could do, and the more that he was able to do, the worse all of everything got. I mean, I think that there's still some interesting stuff in the prequels, but it's
once reality stopped editing him, then he just let it all flop out.
Yeah, once he got the money, he went nuts. I mean,
and that's I think something that you can say both. I think for and like what I was saying about like the common criticism I see for Villeneuve is like that's a guy that you can hand essentially a blank check budget to, and he can deliver something that is like comprehensible and like digestible and both very staggering but also crowd pleasing in a way, but again the very competence of it kind of sands off the edges of mystery and mysticism that you kind of want from something like this. You kind of want it to be 10%, 15%
more
like
Brazil
weird and off-putting and like and not and like nonsensical and like, wait, what was that? Was I getting that right?
So you need 85% Villeneuve and 15% Lynch, I guess, is the movie you want.
Yes, exactly. Why is Patrick Stewart holding a pug? Is that from the books?
But it doesn't matter, right?
I'll keep watching it anyways. Yeah,
that's texture. It's texture. It's alien. It's futuristic. You're not going to understand everything. But I mean, like, I think everything can be comprehensible.
1,000 years in the future, there's gonna be incomprehensible shit all over. You gotta pepper some of that in.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I do like, I think a lot of, as you said a lot, Chris, of the first movie giving you these like things you don't know about. Like you're like, oh, what's a mentat? Why do they have these humans that can compute things like a computer? Like they don't tell you any of this, but you just, it's cool. Like you have to kind of, if you've read the book, you would know. If not, you just kind of go on to it. And I think that as we said before, I think that the Fremen lacked that mysterious quality to them. And that's why I think they felt like kind of like a secondary character, which is unfortunate because they are like the main population that's going to follow Paul to this, grand crusade. And they just don't give them, I don't think they just give them like the respect they deserve.
Yeah, that's maybe where you would want it to be 3 movies too, right? So it's like maybe you would see something in the second movie that's like this weird priest room with a sand pit, and you like see a little thing like circling around in it, making a little hump, but you just see it in the background and you're like, what is that? I would like to know more. I'm seeing this ritual around it, but I don't really know. And in the third movie, you get the conclusion to that. That's like, oh, that's the baby worm. That's where the water of life is, And so you have that kind of like elliptical, like it allows you to gain investment without pure resolution or like plot service. And then later have it filled in, and I think that not being able to understand is like, again, my wife, not a big sci-fi fan, never read the books. I think that's one of the things that drew her in so much is that she watched it the first time and was like, I don't know what the hell is going on here, but I'm like into the vibe. And every time that we subsequently watch it, she's like, oh, I'm filling it in. I know more. Everything makes more sense. It's compelling to be drawn in that payoff, way rather than have everything just concluded.
That payoff is so much richer after having, worked for it. Than just having everything spelled out. It's like the
I felt that's
we were talking about the Alien movie earlier before we started recording, and I think that's a lot of what made Prometheus enjoyable for me, was that they landed on this alien world. None of it's explained. It's all just this mythology. And we slowly work towards a conclusion.
The Alien movies are such a great example of this because I feel like they go in both directions depending on the installment. And what makes it's such a fun franchise is that, you know, they try a lot of different things within the world, and it's like some things. Sometimes you're filling in mythology to it, and it's really satisfying. Sometimes you're filling in mythology to it, and you're like, I didn't need that question answered. That actually kind of makes it less fun, you know. But
just keep plugging away at it.
There's still a ton of mystery to it, even after what have there been 6 Alien movies at this point?
One,
including
2, 3, 4. Yeah,
Prometheus
6.
And and
they're coming out the 7th this summer.
That from the Evil Dead director Fede Alvarez.
Yeah, we were
right?
just talking about this before, and they're releasing Alien original to theaters in a few weeks.
Ooh, that'll be great. I'm glad that they're doing this new thing of like releasing the back franchise before the new thing. I really hope that they do a week or two of IMAX Fury Road before Furiosa.
Oh, that looks so cool.
That's another sci-fi movie from the 21st century that's pretty top tier. I mean,
is that sci-fi though?
I'd say so. Yeah. I mean, do you put all this
again? That's another movie that I might call a fairy tale. You know, I feel like that's the mode that Miller actually writes in, is like these like primal
dystopian,
like relationship based things.
The original series is not really sci-fi. It's really just degrading society over time.
It is dystopia in a way, but dystopia not in the way of like a Blade Runner where there's like okay technology has like gotten the better of us and we have now become like in our more real world where it feels more and more like we are both living through the degradation of the actually useful technology as unuseful and actually dangerous technology slowly takes over our lives and strangles us. That is just like, if you know I'm saying dumb. This is what rule. I'm saying it in a dumb way, but this is what rules about Mad Max is being like, what if cars are the only thing we ever had anymore? What if all humanity was car? Yeah.
It's
like, if human technological evolution just stops permanently at car.
That's when you know you hit the top. You know, there's nowhere else to go. Muscle car.
Hey, what other organism on Earth has invented car? Count the cars.
How many species has made a car?
Biome.
Yeah, we're the top. But that's another. Blade Runner is another one that I think is top tier as well. I think that's better than Dune too.
I need to rewatch the new Blade Runner movie. I only saw it once. I saw it not in theaters, well after it came out when it was on HBO Max. I remember thinking it was fine. There was a lot of interesting stuff in it, but it didn't really like hang as a movie.
That's how I felt.
As well as I wanted to. Yeah.
That's not the same. I've only seen it once too. I saw it in the theater. I'm like, this is okay, but I don't know. Like I always have in the back of my mind the original, and like that's
when you're working off something as totemic as Blade Runner, it's hard to beat the it's fine. Yeah. And usually that's like the best that I could hope for something like that. Which is honestly, I'm excited. As we were saying, I'm excited for Fede Alvarez's Alien. I'm a huge Evil Dead fan. I saw his Evil Dead movie. My reaction was, it's fine. Which I think is pretty high praise because it's easy to make it an Evil Dead thing that would be like, or I'm like, this fucking sucks.
Yeah, that's what I was telling you, Andre, before we were talking about the Alien. I was like, that movie is good. It's not like great. I mean, I'd rather watch Evil Dead 2 or Army of Darkness or the original. I mean, all those are better. I mean,
I still can't believe it. I'm failing my franchise by not having seen Evil Dead Rise.
Oh, I actually haven't seen it either. So
that's a good one to keep in my back pocket for when my wife is out of town or out for the night or something that I need something to watch alone.
What's the I always is it the Cabin in the Woods? Is that what it's called?
Cabin in the Woods, yeah.
Kind of jokey a little bit, breaking the fourth wall.
Yeah.
I like that one a lot. That gave me Rising what's it called? Rising Dead. Evil Dead
Rise.
That gave me some of those vibes.
Rising Dead.
Sorry, I just had like a meltdown for a second there.
No.
Well, what was I going to mention? I guess just like the to a couple other things of like we mostly talked about, I feel like the first half of the Dune movie. And I'm curious what you all think of this as part of to go back to it, of a lot of the movie and a lot of the time in the movie is spent with them doing their attacks on the various spice traders. And that's eventually what, gets him reunited with Gurney. And so then like, that's cool. And that's kind of like that reunion is pretty awesome. I mean, Josh Brolin's character I thought was
Josh
great.
Brolin continues to rip in both these movies.
Completely.
He's so
He kills it.
Yeah.
But some of those pieces, it felt like they were, I mean, to me, those were like another scenario of, we want to do something that looks really cool. And it would look really cool if we have them like taking out, popping out from the sand, just destroying a bunch of Harkonnen. So it's, I think from a movie perspective, it's awesome, but maybe like it's not necessary. Like that's a thing they could not have had and had other, again, this is like very nitpicky. I'm being like
Yeah, but I totally get what you're saying, because at least for me, I also feel it in the movie where I'm like, this sequence is awesome and I'm enjoying watching it, but it also feels like you very much get the feeling of like, and now is the part of the second half of the movie where we would put an action sequence.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
A bit formulaic.
But yeah,
that was exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah, it's a little like that, but it's also like, I mean, it's fun.
Yeah,
it's even when it's like that's I think the specific mood that we're all feeling for this is like, even when it's like in your mind or heart of what you would want, you're like, this isn't exactly what I would have gone. You're still like, but I'm enjoying watching it. So is it really that bad?
That's how I felt in the movie theater. I'm like, this scene is really, really cool, but like, do I like it?
Yeah.
And it seems like kind of lame to be like, everyone around me is like not cheering, but they're all like, they're gripping their seat. I'm like, this is really cool, but I also kind of want like the part where, trying to think of more of the scenes with Jessica and,
is this going to make a bet?
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Is this going to make a better movie than a 10-minute scene of Jessica and Paul debating the morality of like
that, maybe not
misleading the Fremen or something?
But that's what I want.
I would like it.
That's what I want. So come on, guys, let's get it together.
You almost want like the picture-in-picture where you get like the dialogue of the Paul Jessica
a split screen
moral philosophy scene while you're watching Paul and Chani just like shoot down a ornithopter from the sky.
This is where they needed.
So you're doing like the what is that runners game where it's like a lecture on top of somebody playing like Subway Runners or something.
Yeah.
Or what they needed to have is like just they make those scenes, but they cut them for theatrical and then they give it to you on the DVD.
Okay. Or you could just like watch the lectures.
Yeah, why didn't it
a TED Talk,
like extended features?
The Jessica TED Talk.
Let's do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Or like Evan, you were saying earlier, they should have had that one dinner scene in the first movie. That would have been great.
I wish. I really wish.
Just to show the tension between the characters and the inner manipulations and machinations of each interested party.
And that scene is like such a perfect example of the book, of that thing that I was describing earlier, where it's like,
how do you make it?
3 paragraphs of Lady Jessica
inner dialogue,
inner monologue. Jessica line: "We're finding Arrakis very well. Will you pass the salt?"
Yeah, that scene would have been impossible probably to do, but also what would have been cool is that it would have just given you that the vibe of, like you were saying before, of like a Star Wars scene where you have like people in the background, like some of their servants and things on the wall and just things that are just cool.
See, like the food culture of Arrakis, that's something I'm always very, very in on when somebody like takes the time to show the details of
the
like,
world they've created.
Food, like food and service and stuff like that. And that's stuff that's also always very good in these movies.
It would have
like
been
a specific design, perfect example from the fucking first movie when you first see one of the first times you see the Fremen and they're making like spit tea or spit coffee, where it's just like a little insert where they're like spitting into like the French press or whatever, and you just get so much of a sense of like
how desperate it is.
This is how their food and beverage culture works without ever having to like focus on it. It's great.
Yeah, I think one of the things too is they really try hard to show you how much like water means to them as a society, obviously in a place where it doesn't rain, and they have the scenes with Chani, and he's talking about, Paul's talking about how he could dive into an ocean or a lake, and like she can't even comprehend these. It's hard to kind of portray that. I thought they could have gone even more into showing kind of the desperation in some of those ways of how hard it is, how hard their life is.
I think
they did show it. I mean, they for sure.
But I think they minimized it to a degree. Like water is
because they showed the pools
so omnipresent. And that just wasn't, I don't think, was communicated.
Yeah, and even when it was, like, it took somebody pointing this out, I mean, after the movie, which is a kind of nice touch, but it wasn't highlighted in the right way for me to really get it. Is like, at the beginning, you see how intense the Fremen ritual is to reclaim water from a dead body. And by the end of the movie, they've abandoned their rituals so much that they're just burning corpses in piles. And I think that is a good subtle touch, and like, kudos for making it. But it's like, I don't know, maybe that is something that they should have underlined or put a line under, being like, do we not even reclaim their water anymore? It's like, no, these people are below even our need for their water is poison.
Which
or whatever.
Just isn't the
Did you
case.
think they say at some point?
they would have taken it.
Yeah.
Any moisture.
Yeah, I do like the scene, like they use in the book where, when Paul cries and he's like, you give water for the dead. Like that, like those, like those are things that were, I think, lots of subtle touches and things that were right from the book that hit the perfect note. And it's just, I mean, like, I think for almost an hour, basically been saying, it's not a bad movie. It has lots of incredible scenes. Like the performances from just about every actor in this movie is pretty amazing. I mean,
Batista, great. Butler, great. Pugh delivering some pueness. I don't know. That character doesn't really have much to offer. My one that I said earlier that I wanted to subtly critique the presence of is, and it feels almost blasphemous to say this, but I found Christopher Walken distracting. Like, I'm glad that he's showing up and doing stuff, but it always felt like whenever he was on screen, and I get the vibe of like decaying emperor, but I was always just like, whenever it cut to him, I was like, oh, hey, it's Christopher Walken.
Yeah. Too much cowbell.
So they need a different actor, you think? That would have been like a
or something. It just felt kind of novelty or something for him. I don't know. Maybe it is just like his age or something. Where just it felt kind of.
Well, he hasn't been.
Like, is he still up to this?
He hasn't been in anything this big in how long? And then he makes his
years. I don't think he's been in anything.
And then he makes his welcome back as the Emperor of Dune. It seems a bit distracting. Yeah.
What big movie, like even like big movie in general, could I think of that he was in last?
No, he's been out of it for a while.
I mean, but I think I always like seeing Walken. I don't care.
Yeah, I mean, he's so beloved. It just bumped for me a little bit, or I found it a little more distracting than it was cool.
I don't care for
I could see that.
Irulan. Yeah,
Florence Pugh. You didn't like it?
Florence Pugh? Do you not like her?
I didn't care for her performance, but also I just don't like the character of Princess Irulan, and then the way they portrayed her as competent, which was just completely off from the book. That rubbed me wrong.
Again, a thing where you get like a totally different vision of her in the book, because almost every chapter is introduced with like parts of her diary, and so you're getting her perspective kind of geniusly transmitted to you before you even know really who she is.
It was hard to bring her in.
That literary device, it's kind of like, well, this character's just a drip.
Yeah.
Well, could they have done a voiceover in different parts of her kind of delivering some of those lines, or is that kind of just a cheesy?
I mean, I guess they were kind of trying to do that when they kept cutting back to her planet, but it was like, it was not quite enough to give a real sense of what you wanted from her. So it was either like do that more or don't do it at all, you know?
Yeah. I thought her performance is fine. Like, I think did it well. I could see your point, Andrew, where it's maybe not to the character, but
yeah, I might just have.
I do feel like this.
I might just have a bad feeling about it because of my views on the book.
I do feel like, because I need to get out of here in like 10 minutes or so. So I do appreciate the part of this conversation that this feels like a safe space, a group therapy for all of us. who like after this movie came out and seeing like a lot of like, oh, this is one of the greatest action sci-fi movies of all time, being like, it was fine. To share that thought with all of each other. I bet this will bump up another 5%, 10%, half star in my appraisal of it on a rewatch. But I just couldn't shake the feeling of being underwhelmed in a slight way leaving the theater.
I think that's kind of my feeling overall, is that maybe it was also just the hype of it too. Maybe that played into it and it being billed. And then maybe I don't know, did you see it on opening day, Chris? Like the first day it came out?
I did. I saw it Thursday at like 10 p.m. or something like that. I think we got out of it like after 1.
So that feels
IMAX,
like that's
crowd.
like hype, right? That's like you're going in.
It's electric audience. Everybody was like super thrilled to be there. And you know what? I had a great time watching it. Great night out at the theater. But I was rating the experience 5 stars and the movie like 3.5, something like that.
I'd say about 3 stars out of 5. If I step back and look at the whole experience of Dune Part 2, and I say what's my main grievance with it, it's how the Fremen were portrayed and how it kind of separated from the author's vision of Arab people and their struggle against colonialism. I think that was a bit what I was underwhelmed about the most.
Yeah. I think I gave it 3 stars, I think. And I agree, Chris. I think if I were to watch it again in a month or something when it comes out for, streaming, or even if I saw it in the theater again, I think I probably would appreciate it a little bit more, especially after thinking about it and talking about it too. And again, not a bad movie.
No.
Yeah. It also might be something where like the third one can go, can get insanely weird. And if they do it, and if they lean in to just the kind of outer limits of what Dune, I understand the third book's like Dune thought to be, it also might uprate this book or this movie as like a necessary bridge between introduction and truly weird shit.
That's you could be totally
in the future. And like where they go with Paul's characterization, I think will have a lot to do with how this movie is retroactively appraised, because at the end of it, he is the triumphant hero who has united the planet and expelled the Harkonnens. Also another mild criticism is that the final battle sequence is like 2 seconds long. They like arrive on the worms and then it just like cuts to him entering the Emperor's chamber. I'm like, I was really looking forward to just worm on tank carnage, and you kind of denied it.
Yeah, the worms are too big. They just come through.
Give us our worm orgy.
Yeah. I mean, it's cool when they emerge from the dust cloud, but I want to see the apocalyptic doom of when the worm swallows the spice harvester in the first movie. That thing is cool. That sequence is so awesome.
That might be
and
the
you're kind
best
of like
a scene of both movies. That was just so
just the
incredible.
Shot with Paul being like holding the side of the ornithopter, looking out, and you've got the thopter framed, and you just see the worm, like the ground dissolve to the worm mouth as the harvester falls in. Like that one shot. Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is the best thing in any of these movies. You get like the awe and power,
the massiveness of the world
of the worm. Yeah,
that's probably why they didn't do it in the second movie, right? Like they already had given you that or something. I don't know.
Here's your treat.
Or they had $20 more million to do.
Yeah. We'll give you one more treat next movie.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think that I do look forward to seeing how crazy they get in the third movie, because I would definitely recommend reading it, Chris. It's wild compared to the first one. It's
great. I'll pick it up. I know after reading the first one, or the first book, which I quite enjoyed, even if it is very very dense, and sometimes, I mean, how to say this? It's like an enjoyable slog, It's like homework you're assigning yourself. Yep.
It's not the best writing. I think you said, Andre, when we talked about the first one, it's like kind of clunky.
Yeah, he's not. I don't know. He's not the greatest narrator, but he created such a rich world that you just want to stay in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would. So anyone out there who hasn't seen it, I think you should still go see this movie, and I think you should also maybe not read it right before you go in to see it, like I did.
Or just
maybe
read
read it after, or maybe you've already, maybe, or just or whatever, But yeah, I think I like your phrase of this, Chris. It's like a little therapy for us to talk about. I'm sure another podcast talking about this movie spend an hour, talking about everything
rapturous
being so great,
praise.
and that's fine. That's fine. You can have your big movie. I'm not gonna talk down on you.
And again, these two movies together are a wild accomplishment, and movies that I will watch many times throughout the rest of my life, that I will return to as just pure entertainment over and over. And we'll see where it goes with third, and maybe they will totally redeem into this, and I will be comfortable saying one of the greatest sci-fi series of all
Chris,
time.
can I ask?
Yeah, and once you get to the trilogy status,
I was just going to ask, do you read sci-fi a lot?
No, I don't. And I didn't really as a kid either. I'm trying to get back a little back into like some genre fiction reading. Actually, the biggest sci-fi that I've been reading recently is I finally picked up Hickman's X-Men run from a few years ago, the House of X, Powers of X X-Men series, which
fan.
I'm not. This is like the first full X-Men arc I've ever read, but it was highly recommended to me from a friend, and I found it fucking awesome.
Hickman's great.
And I'm excited to I'm excited to work more through that Hickman run from, the last, I guess, 5 years or so.
I'd also recommend the God Loves, Man Kills from the early 80s that kind of spurred the first trilogy of movies. I actually I just did an episode I recorded a couple days ago on the first X-Men movie.
Oh, really?
Great.
I'll have to check that out. No, I
love it. I haven't really.
I just today finished Echopraxia by Peter Watts, the author of Blind Sight. I don't know if any of you are familiar.
Okay.
It's just I came into this wanting to discuss better science fiction. So, but I mean, I'll do Dune instead.
That's fair.
Well, you know what? I will say that the one work of classic sci-fi that I have read and really stuck with me, actually had some news about it recently, which is William Gibson's Neuromancer, which I
such a
love.
good book.
And they're just announced that they're finally making an official adaptation of it as an Apple TV series, done by the guys who do Jack Ryan on Amazon, which is like, I'm sure they're competent showrunners, but there's a lot of ways that you can go with something like Neuromancer that could either be like cool or very
that's
very
like
bad.
The foundation of cyberpunk
it's ambitious
as a genre.
Yeah,
so that's a big deal. Yeah, that would be cool. But no, have you done?
No, I didn't know that. But yeah, that's.
Guys,
have we done Event Horizon, Evan?
I have not done Event Horizon.
Okay, we should do Event Horizon because that's what I look for in my science fiction is Lovecraftian horror in space. That's all I want out of life.
Great. I have not seen that. I will add that to the watch list.
Pretty great.
That was
Maybe
one of the
later
scariest
tonight.
movies I saw as a kid. And
Yes.
as an adult, it's not nearly as scary.
I
but
haven't seen it
a good
recently.
movie.
I know it doesn't hold up, but I'm excited to watch it again.
Yeah, I'm down to talk about it. But
I will say, as I go, I am buzzing. If we're just talking about movies, I mentioned Evil Dead earlier. I am buzzing on a movie that I saw today that I don't think is immediately available for everyone. But if you are hearing this and you have the opportunity to see a movie called Hundreds of Beavers, you must go see this movie. It is one of the most hilarious and inventive things that I have seen recently. It is essentially like a live action, like Looney Tunes, like Buster Keaton silent film slapstick pastiche, done for almost no budget by a handful of guys in like basement studios. They're like,
holy shit,
After Effects wizards. It's just like a silly story about a fur trapper fighting hundreds of beavers. In increasingly Looney Tunes situations, and the beavers are all guys wearing like mascot costumes.
Perfect.
Like all the animals are like.
I'm going to look for it right after this.
So funny. I highly recommend it, and the level of like love of slapstick and like pure filmmaking. It's a silent film. It's in black and white. It's not silent. It's got like sound effects and stuff, but there's no dialogue. It plays like a Looney Tune cartoon. The love of slapstick and classic cinema and how you just like construct good cinematic language is really reminds me of Evil Dead the original in terms of like what you can accomplish with some good vision, a knowledge of how cinema works, and almost zero money.
Oh wow! I'll have to check it out.
Everyone should go check out that. And I got nothing. That's a good way to end too. And I'm going to look for this
Hundreds of
movie.
Beavers and Event Horizon.
Okay. Well, but and we've been listening to Andre and Chris. Thank you both for talking about Dune and getting our minds in the right space about Dune.
Yeah, I'll still keep drinking that spice.
Drink that warm cum. Let's go. Come on.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, everyone catch you next time.